In the shadow-strewn alleyways of Fortuna, a planet notorious for its ruthless governance and formidable fortresses, Kale moved like a wraith cloaked in darkness. The air was thick with the metallic tang of ionized barriers and the distant hum of patrol drones. His target tonight, Lord Vrax, a tyrant whose reign terrorized millions across the galaxy. Kale's footsteps were silent against the cobblestone as he approached the fortress, his figure blending seamlessly with the night. His gear, a sophisticated array of stealth and weaponry, was a stark contrast to the ancient stones that made up the outer walls of Vrax's stronghold. The juxtaposition was not lost on him. Here was the old world meeting the new in a silent battle of wits and will. The entrance was guarded, as expected. Two of Vrax's elite guards, their scales glinting under the dim light of the security lamps, stood vigilant. Kale watched from the shadows, analyzing their movements, the timing of their glances. Precision was key, hesitation meant death, or worse, capture. He waited, patient as the stars above, until the moment presented itself, a brief, predictable lapse in their coordinated routine. With the swiftness of a striking serpent, he darted forward. His hand moved in a blur, a stunned device in his grasp sending the guards into a silent collapse. He caught one before he hit the ground, easing him down to avoid the clatter of armor on stone. Kale was through the gate before the first guard's sigh escaped his lips. Inside, the fortress was a labyrinth of opulence and defense. Tapestries depicting the glories of Vrax's conquests adorned the walls, their vibrant colors mocking the suffering they represented. Kale's path, however, was memorized down to the steps he needed to take. He had studied this place, had learned its secrets as one learns the lines of an old, familiar map. As he moved deeper into the heart of the stronghold, the air grew cooler, the silence more pronounced. Here, in the core of power, was where he would find Vrax. His hand rested briefly on the hilt of his blade, a silent promise to those who had fallen victim to the warlord's cruelty. The door to Vrax's chamber was as grand as it was secure, carved from the wood of a long-extinct tree, banded with steel from the mines of Zerferon. Kale applied a small, unassuming device to the lock, its lights blinking once, twice, then steady. The lock clicked softly, obediently, and he slipped inside. Vrax was there, as intelligence had confirmed, sitting at his desk that overflowed with maps and plans, the glow of a single lamp casting deep shadows across his face. The warlord was speaking, though no one else was present, practicing a speech, perhaps, or dictating a record of his rule. His voice was deep, resonant, and utterly unaware of the danger now closing in on him. Kale's approach was silent, his presence unnoticed until it was far too late. As he reached the warlord, he spoke, his voice low but clear, "Your reign ends tonight." Vrax's reaction was swift, but Kale was swifter. The struggle was brief, a dance of desperation on Vrax's part, but inevitability on Kale's. When it was done, the tyrant lay still, his plans for further conquests silenced along with his breath. As Kale turned to leave, his eye caught a glint under a pile of papers on Vrax's desk, an encrypted data pad. Curiosity piqued, he picked it up, his fingers working quickly to bypass the security. What he found within was unexpected, a network of corruption and conspiracy that went far beyond a single tyrant's rule. It hinted at a larger threat, one that could endanger the fragile balance of power across the galaxies. The realization of what he held in his hands was heavy, like the first rumble of a coming storm. With the data pad secured in his gear, Kale made his escape, leaving the fortress and its fallen lord behind. The night air greeted him like an old friend, the stars above Fortuna blinking silently, the witnesses to his deed. As he disappeared into the darkness from which he had emerged, Kale knew this was only the beginning. Tonight was a victory, but the war, the true war, was just starting to unfold. As Kale made his way through the labyrinthine alleys of Fortuna's capital, his mind replayed the night's events with meticulous precision. The air was still thick with the latent energy of his escape, carrying the sharp scent of ionized particles left by the security measures he had bypassed. Each shadow seemed to whisper of pursuit, urging him to quicken his steps. He knew that killing Vrax would send ripples through the Galactic Coalition's echelons, but the data pad he'd secured hinted at a deeper abyss than he'd anticipated. As he navigated the quieter parts of the city, a figure detached itself from the shadows. Kale's hand instinctively went to his weapon, but the figure raised her hands in a gesture of peace. "Kale," she said, her voice a modulated whisper that betrayed no fear. "I'm Myra. I believe we share a common enemy." Her appearance was unassuming yet distinct, clothed in the dark fabrics of a local blend. Her eyes shone with an intelligence and wariness that matched his own. Kale's suspicion lingered, but his curiosity was piqued. "Talk," he commanded tersely. Myra's story unfolded as they moved together through the dim streets. She was a former intelligence operative for a faction within the coalition that had once sought peace but had since been purged by the very warlords Kale hunted. Her network had been dismantled, leaving her with nothing but the knowledge of the coalition's inner corruptions and a thirst for justice. "Vrax was just the beginning," Myra continued, her voice a steady stream that seemed to flow directly into Kale's thoughts. "The data pad you have, it's the key to exposing a conspiracy that could either cripple the coalition or plunge us into deeper chaos." Kale weighed her words, his gaze never straying far from the path ahead. "And why trust me?" he asked, his tone edged with the steel of skepticism. "Because," Myra replied, stepping into a sliver of moonlight that lit up her determined expression, "like it or not, you've already become a part of this. You're now as much a target as I am." The revelation didn't surprise Kale, but it solidified the weight of his decision to trust her, at least for now. They reached the outskirts of the city where a small, nondescript shuttle awaited, its engines humming softly, ready to whisk them away from immediate danger. "Where are we headed?" Kale inquired, as they boarded the shuttle. "To meet with others who have managed to escape the purge," Myra answered, her hands moving deftly over the controls. "We regroup, we plan, and then we hit them where it hurts." The ascent into the stratosphere was smooth, the cityscape shrinking beneath them into a tapestry of lights and shadows. As they breached the atmosphere, the stars seemed to lean closer, a silent audience to their plight. Myra showed Kale the encrypted files she had been able to access before her network fell apart. The documents were a tangle of financial transactions, covert communications, and damning evidences that implicated high-ranking officials in numerous atrocities. "We need to decrypt this completely," Kale noted, pointing to a particularly convoluted string of data. "It might tell us who else is involved and how deep this goes." "I know someone who can help," Myra said, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "But it's not just about exposing them. It's about ensuring that once they fall, the void isn't filled with something worse." The conversation shifted as they discussed potential allies and strategies. Kale found himself reassessing Myra, seeing not just the operative, but the person who had lost as much to the coalition's ruthlessness as he had. There was a shared understanding between them, a mutual recognition of the stakes they played for. As the shuttle coursed through the darkness of space, heading towards a rendezvous that would gather other shadows like themselves, Kale felt a shift within him. This was no longer a solitary pursuit but a collective struggle. And in Myra, he had found not just an ally, but a conduit to a larger resistance. The chapter closes as their shuttle docks with a larger vessel hidden among the debris of a forgotten battle, the scars of war etched into its hull, a testament to the resilience of those who refuse to be subdued. Here, in the void between stars, a new chapter of rebellion was about to begin, with Kale and Myra at the heart of it. The derelict space station, hidden within the remnants of a shattered moon, served as the rendezvous point for the remnants of Myra's network. As Kale and Myra stepped into the dimly lit conference room, a motley crew of former operatives, ex-soldiers, and disillusioned scientists greeted them with cautious optimism. Kale's gaze swept across the assembled group, each face telling a story of loss and defiance. Myra introduced them briefly, her voice carrying a quiet authority that resonated in the cramped space. Kale noted the wary looks directed his way. Trust was a commodity as rare as peace in these troubled times. "We don't have much time," Myra began, her eyes locking with Kale's. "The data we've recovered is encrypted, but it holds the answers we need." A lean figure detached from the shadowy perimeter of the room. "Allow me," said the man, his voice tinged with a nonchalant confidence. His name was Talon, a former Coalition cryptologist whose expertise could be the key to deciphering the tangled web of data. As Talon set up his equipment, the air filled with the electric anticipation of imminent revelations. Screens flickered to life, displaying strings of code that danced like fireflies in the dark. Kale leaned in, observing as Talon's fingers flew over the holographic keyboard, each stroke slicing through the data's defenses. Myra explained their strategy in hushed tones to the group, each member hanging on her words, understanding the stakes were higher than ever. "This isn't just about taking them down," she said, her gaze intense. "It's about making sure we have a plan in place for what comes after. We need to ensure that the chaos they've created doesn't consume us all." As the decryption progressed, Talon paused, a frown creasing his brow. "There's something here you need to see," he said, pulling up a document that made the room fall silent. It was a communication between high-ranking officials discussing a planned purge of dissenting sectors, scheduled to occur in less than a week. The revelation sent a chill through the room. The planned purge wasn't just a tightening of control, it was an obliteration of anyone who stood against the coalition. "We need to act," Kale said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. His words sparked a flurry of activity, with members breaking into smaller groups, plotting various ways to use this information to their advantage. Myra and Kale huddled with Talon, poring over maps and data, their minds racing to formulate a plan. "We hit them during the purge," Kale suggested, his strategic acumen coming to the forefront. "It's risky, but it's the best chance we have to catch them off guard." As they devised their plan, Kale's mind was also on the broader implications of their fight. He realized that this was bigger than any one of them, bigger than their personal vendettas. They were not just fighting to survive, they were fighting for the future of the galaxy. The chapter ends with Kale stepping up to address the entire group, his newfound leadership role cementing his transformation from a lone assassin to a key figure in a larger movement. He outlined the plan, his voice steady and inspiring. "We have one chance to turn the tide, not just to survive but to reshape our future. We strike at the heart of their operation during the purge. We expose them, we stop them, and we take back what they've stolen from us." As his words echoed in the charged atmosphere, the group's resolve hardened. They were ready to follow him into the heart of danger, ready to fight for a cause that had grown larger than any of them could have imagined. The chapter closes on a note of tense anticipation, setting the stage for the explosive confrontation that looms in the final act, with the stakes clearer and higher than ever. The operation was set to coincide with the galactic dusk, when the shadows of the twin moons of Calates cast the longest shadows over the Coalition's central command. Kale, Myra, and their assembled team were in position, their nerves taut as the strings of a war harp. Kale's eyes scanned the horizon, the last rays of the setting sun glinting off his visor. His team, a blend of seasoned fighters and young rebels, was dispersed in strategic locations around the command center, ready to strike at his signal. "Remember, this isn't just about disrupting their purge," Kale murmured into the comm, his voice a low thrum of focused energy. "It's about sending a message that cannot be ignored." Myra, stationed in a high vantage point with a team of snipers, replied, her voice crisp in his ear, "We've got you covered. On your mark." As the planetary alarms began to wail, signaling the start of the purge, Kale gave the signal. Explosions rocked the perimeter defenses of the command center, sowing chaos among the coalition troops. The meticulously planned assault unfolded like a deadly dance, each move choreographed to drive deeper into the enemy's heart. Inside the command center, Kale led a small squad through the havoc, their path a series of controlled bursts and strategic withdrawals. The smell of scorched metal and the sharp tang of ionized air filled their senses as they breached room after room. Talon, working remotely, guided them through the labyrinthine corridors. Left, then right at the next junction. "You're approaching the main control room." His voice was calm, a steady presence in the storm. As they reached the control room, the doors sealed shut before them, a final barrier mocking their efforts. Kale set a breaching charge, the countdown ticking away the seconds. He exchanged a look with his team, their resolve mirrored in his eyes. The charge detonated, and they burst through. Inside, they found the coalition's leaders, aghast, scrambling to activate their defenses. But it was too late. Cale strode forward, his presence commanding the room. "This ends now," he declared, his weapon trained on the highest-ranking officer. His words were not just a threat but a promise of a new dawn. Myra's team took out the communications array, severing the command center's links to the rest of the coalition forces. Isolated and leaderless, the purge ground to a halt. As Cale negotiated the surrender of the command center, Myra joined him, her presence reinforcing the unity of their cause. Together, they addressed the captured coalition leaders, their words broadcasted across the galaxy, unveiling the extent of the corruption and the bravery of the rebellion. "This is the beginning of a new era," Cale's voice echoed through the channels, reaching billions. "One where fear and oppression have no place. Where we stand together as equals." The chapter ends as Cale and Myra step out of the command center, greeted by the cheers of their comrades and the freed citizens of Calates. The twin moons rise in full, their light a symbol of the renewed hope that now coursed through the galaxy. Fireworks ignite across the sky, not in celebration of the purge, but in honor of the victory over tyranny. Cale and Myra watch, their hands linked, knowing the road ahead would be fraught with challenges but hopeful for the future they were now free to build. The narrative closes on this high note, setting a tone of triumph and the promise of continued struggle and resilience. The story, polished and refined, is ready to inspire those who hear it, a testament to the power of unity and the indomitable spirit of rebellion.